Hello, this is Father Michael Nasser coming to you from St. Nicholas Orthodox Church here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, with this week's Midweek Reflection. And this week I'm not so much reflecting as recommending. I have a recommendation this week, but this recommendation comes with some, I think, important warnings, or at least some things to consider. And so the recommendation is, if you haven't already begun watching a series called The Chosen, I want to recommend it, but it's important, as I said, to get to the warnings. We'll get to those. First, why am I recommending it? In our day and age, well, let me go back. Historically, people experienced story, hearing a story, telling a story, getting into a story, mainly by literature. If people could read, they read. If they couldn't read, or even if they could read, they heard a lot of things read to them. So for most of human history, we understood story and the impact of story by literature, reading it ourselves or hearing it read to us. So you're sitting and you're listening to somebody read words that someone else has written, and in your mind, you're experiencing a narrative, a flow, characters, action, concepts, relationships, all those things that are involved in a story. That was most of human history. But starting really only the last couple decades, the shift from literature to movies and television, to an audio visual, the fact that you're watching me and you're hearing me in this medium is actually very new. And for most of us, this is the primary way we encounter story. We watch movies, we watch TV shows, we watch videos, and it's the way that we primarily engage in stories. You go see a movie, what's a movie? It's a story. It has a beginning, it has characters, it has actions, it has developments, and then you have a resolution or whatever. But it's a story. There are very few people who primarily read their stories and secondarily watch. There are a couple are probably in my family. But most of us, our primary way of encountering story is audiovisual. It's movies, it's television. For that reason, for most people, reading the Bible or reading anything is a challenge. And it's hard for us to engage in story reading because, again, primarily we are audiovisual in terms of how we take in story. So I'm encouraging people to read the Bible. They want to, they know they should, and yet they can't get themselves to do it. Why? It's hard. It's a lot harder work when we encounter story primarily audibly, whatever that word is, and visually. However, now for the first time ever, we have the first multi-season television show about the life of Jesus. Now, there have been movies about Jesus before, for a long, long time, going back to the 50s. We've had movies about Jesus, so we've seen the life of Jesus portrayed in movies. But it was a movie, it was an hour, 2 hours, sometimes a mini-series. But now that so much of our intake of story is audiovisual, this series, The Chosen, has a great impact on a lot of people watching it because it really is an in-depth, because it's multi-season. Right now, I think season 3 is out. You have the scripture presented, the gospel, the story of Jesus, in a form that most of us primarily interact with story. In other words, it impacts a lot of us in a way that reading the gospels or hearing the gospel read doesn't impact us just because of how we take in story. So what's good about it? It's a way that engages us in a way that we normally engage with story. So that's really good. I think it is very faithful to the scripture. There's a lot in it. Most of it that's in it is not in the Bible because it's all about backstory and developing characters and understanding what is in the scripture. And I think what I've seen so far, I've seen almost 1.5 seasons. It's very faithful to the scriptures of what's in the scripture. There's just a lot in the show that's not in the Bible. I don't think any of it that I've seen so far I have any great concern about. So it's not the content that I'm concerned about. But the main thing I think is good is really can impact us because of how we're normally attuned to tune into story. So for that reason, I do recommend it. I found it very, very impactful even on my own life. All right, so what are the warnings? The warnings are, it's not the Bible. They don't claim to be. In fact, they say very clearly, we are not presenting the scriptures. We're presenting a show that presents the scriptures and then a whole lot more. They're very honest about it. The producers are mainly Christians, evangelical Christians, but I think what they're presenting is sound. But they're saying to us it's not the scripture. So what's the danger? The danger is that because it engages us so much that we're going to primarily engage with the story of Jesus from this television show and not the Bible itself. We should never do that. There's no substitute for opening up the words of Scripture and reading the actual words of Scripture or going to church and hearing it read. No substitute for it. And one of the dangers might be, well, we don't read the Bible, we'll watch a show. But why? Because it's entertaining, it's engaging, that kind of thing. That's one thing. That's one danger. The other danger is because of the impact of an audio-visual presentation, it can become the standard. In other words, the next time I hear a story about the life of Jesus in the Bible, I'm picturing what I saw in the show. That's a very dangerous thing because, again, the Scripture is primary. This show is a show. As good and as powerful, as impactful it might be, it's still a show. And we want the Scripture to be the Scripture and the show to be a show. So those are the two main warnings that, again, we could lose interest in reading the Scriptures, or that when we do read the Scripture, we refer back to the show as our primary reality. That being said, if you take those into consideration, my recommendation is it's a good thing. It's a good thing to engage in seeing the life of Jesus portrayed in a way that is a very powerful way, especially the lives of the disciples and how they begin to encounter him and how he changes them throughout their relationship. So, overall recommendation, but some very important caveats that I hope you'll take seriously. And that being said, you can have my recommendation to watch The Chosen. I hope you found that helpful. I know it's lengthy, but I thought it was really important to get into that. And and feel free to share what you think. So, God bless you. Share this with your friends any way you like, and God willing, we'll see you in next week's video.